Hello, everyone. This is my first ever video on YouTube, nonetheless, Digimon related. But I wanted to be making a video for some time now regarding Davis and Ken specifically. I know every time since BT16 was released last year, whenever there is a announcement related to upcoming ban lists or there's some speculation regarding upcoming ban lists, Davis and Ken seems to find their way on the ban list requests and speculation. Which credit where credit's due, like for good reason. Obviously, the tamer is very good. He does allow the deck to do a lot of interesting shenanigans that did not exist during the BT8 and BT12 versions of the deck when the starter deck came out earlier. But nonetheless, he's been under a lot of fire right now, or they've been under a lot of fire right now, as we are post Nats moving into our alignment with Japan releases next month. Um, with that being said, I feel like I can't necessarily remain silent anymore. Obviously, I'm just kind of talking into an echo chamber in a vacuum of the internet, and I doubt anyone will even see this. But regardless, amongst talking with friends, I can only get my opinion out so much, and I really feel like people are looking at the wrong cards when it comes to restricting anything if something needs to get hit from the Imperial deck itself. And I wanted to kind of come out first and foremost saying that everyone's entitled to their own opinion. I am saying this with no disrespect towards anyone. I've seen videos on YouTube, any person I've spoken to in real life at locals, amongst my friend groups, however it may be. I'm obviously entitled to my own opinion, but nonetheless, the the people or the cards that people are looking at, in my opinion, are the wrong cards for this deck. And I want to give you the perspective of an Imperial player. Imperial was my first deck when I came into the game a couple years ago. It was my first starter deck that I bought. I've been maining it since then, and I love the deck to bits. It's one of my highest rarity decks, and it's one that I will always go back to no matter what decks I'm testing out. It's my comfort food. I love it. I love it so much. But that being said, this video is to essentially defend these two teenagers, these two boys here. And I'm here to tell you that they are, in fact, the patsy when it comes to the problem that people are experiencing with Imperial. Now, um, I understand that as an opponent, for example, when you're playing against the Imperial deck, you often see your opponent interacting mostly with this tamer if it's on board while they're doing anything else. Obviously they're trying to OTK you with their line if they can. I mean, if they have the starter deck dragon mode, sure thing. But they're doing a lot of their swings with Paildramon. But this tamer allows them to get to that for sure. So when you're on the opposite end of the table, you're seeing them interact mostly with this tamer. However, I'm here to tell you that it's actually the level 4s that are the problem, specifically the XVmon and Stingmon from BT12. They are the ones who, unfortunately, as much as I love them, are creating a problem in which Imperial is able to do crazy things and maintain turn width. It is, in fact, not Davis and Ken. And the goal of this video, and in my opinion, is to try and prove to you of that. Of course, it is my opinion. You can have different opinions. You very may well disagree with me. And if you do, that's perfectly fine. If you want to add comments, that's perfectly fine. I'm not a big YouTube channel. This is my first video that I'm posting, so I'm not going to sit here and be like and subscribe, follow for more, whatever. If this ends up doing well, I may post more different variety of Digimon content. I'm a huge fan of the game, and I've always looked for a way to enter into the content creation aspect of it. So I'm trying with this, seeing where it goes. But before I get into anything with the level 4 XV and Stingmon, I want to take a look at the other tamers that released with um, specifically BT16. So taking a look quickly, we have Cody and TK. Now, Cody and TK, similar effect, start of main, play an Armadillo or a Patamon from your hand without paying the cost. At the end of your opponent's turn, return to the hand. No changes there when it comes to that. Their other effect, your turn, when one of your Digimon digivolves into a black or yellow Digimon, suspend this tamer to gain 1 memory. Again, same thing as Davis and Ken, no issue. If DNA digivolving, de-digivolve one of your opponents. De-digivolve is a really extremely strong mechanic in the game. simply because there are not many cards that have protection from de-digivolving. I want to say there's 3 or 4 now. There could be more. I haven't really looked into that much of the EX8 set that's going to be releasing shortly, or anything that released a little earlier than that. But nonetheless, I would say three of the effect, or sorry, two of the effects here are the same, exact same. And now let's look at Yole and Kari. At start of your main, play a Hawkmon or Salamon from your hand without paying a cost. End of your turn, return it to your hand. Your turn, when one of them digivolves into red or yellow, suspend the gain 1 memory. Exact same effects. If DNA digivolving, one of your opponents gets neg 3k for the turn. I think there's no mistaking that this is definitely the weakest of the dual tamers from BT16. Neg 3k is great. However, you're really only targeting floodgates with that, unless you are obviously running this in the tribal deck, in which case you're just negging significantly more DK as you, or DP as you build up the line, which is perfectly fine. But on its own, on paper, weakest out of the three. So going back to Davis and Ken, as we can see, the majority of the card itself is the exact same as the other dual tamers. With the only difference being if DNA Digivolving trash the top 3 cards of your opponent's Digimon. Digivolution cards of your opponent's Digimon, my apologies. Now, with that being said, that obviously is to combo well with the Paildramon that released from BT16, and it works perfectly fine. Like on paper, the deck does what it, or the 2 cards do what they want to do in tandem with each other. But when you throw in the level 4s that do not exist with the Armadillomon Patamon deck or the Hawkmon and Salamon deck, and you throw in the XV and Stingmon for Imperial, that is where this effect seemingly takes off a little bit more. And if there's one thing that I know Bandai does a really good job of, or at least they claim to, and we hope they do, is that when it comes to banning and restricting cards, while there are problem cards, if those problem cards are going to, if hitting those problem cards are going to really hurt the deck concepts that they're intended to be for, they try to hit cards around it that facilitate and really accentuate those problems. We've seen that with other bans that happened in the past. But with this one specifically, again, this video is to be in defense of Davis and Ken for BT16. I'm here to tell you that the problem cards, that if there are to be restrictions for Imperial, it is the XVmon and Stingmon from the BT12 Across Time set. Reason being, for this effect right here, when this Digimon would DNA into another green Digimon, gain 1 memory. Similar to this one, when it would DNA Digivolve into a blue Digimon, gain 1 memory. It's important to know all the factors that come around this. These are both 2-cost EVOs, right? The inheritables, will ignore those for the time being, but these are both 2-cost EVOs over top of their respective blue or green level 3. So you have a Vmon and Raising, you have a Davis and Ken on board, you push up your Vmon, start of main, you play out a Vmon or Wormmon, do your search shenanigans, yada yada. Let's say your opponent puts you to, 1 memory, right? You do your search shenanigans with your searcher, BT12, Vmon or Wormmon. You grab a Stingmon off of that. You already have an XVmon in your hand. You Evo your Vmon into the Stingmon or the XVmon itself. You're technically passing to your opponent to 1. This is a very like suboptimal play. Let's say your opponent memory choked you. You pass your opponent to 1 because it costs 2 to Evo, right? You suspend your Davis and Ken early, so now you're not getting the DNA effect to trash cards under your opponent's hand. But let's say you're doing this turn 2 or 3, so they don't really have a board established. You pass your opponent to 1 with the Evo for the XVmon. You tap your Davis and Ken, gain your memory back. Now you're back at 0 memory. Perfect. You Evo your Stingmon on top of the Wormmon that you just played out with your Davis and Ken, passes your opponent to 2 memory. Now your inheritables for the Vmon and Wormmon both have end of turn DNA, so you trigger one of them. You DNA these 2 into Paildramon. Both of these effects will trigger, and you will gain 2 memory back, putting you back at 0 memory, maintaining your turn, allowing you to do your 2 checks with Paildramon. 1, 2, great job. Bob's your uncle. You also have jamming. Perfect. Now you've already applied pressure to your opponent. Not only are you getting whichever Paildramon effect that you have, whether it's the starter deck, BT16, BT12, whatever it may be, not only do you have that effect on the board, you've applied pressure, you've done your 2 checks, and now you can go into dragon mode if you want to and do whatever dragon mode effect that you're willing to do. You can play something else in the back. You can play a second Davison Ken. You can do all that stuff on one turn essentially. And that is all because of these 2 level 4s themselves. Now, obviously, as an Imperial main and an Imperial player, I it would suck seeing anything hit from the deck. I love this deck to bits. However, if I was to say something should get restricted for this deck, it would be either both of these, preferably only one of them. If your Bandai is to hit one of them, I would suggest hitting the XVmon. Reason being, we have many other XVmons that can be used. Even if you still want jamming, you can go back to the EX1 XVmon, where he just has jamming, like that's his effect, both inheritable and on his card itself is just jamming. That one is slightly suboptimal in related to the fact that he is a 5 play cost. I can even show him here for your reference. Where is this guy right here? So he is a 5 play cost. So if you had to slap him down, if you don't have a rookie on board, you're technically wasting more memory, making it even harder for you to maintain and pull turn back. But nonetheless, jamming is the crutch of us blue players. So if we want to maintain our safety when we're swinging into security, we continue to run this guy. Otherwise, we have the BT16, which, to be honest with you, I actually like this card. I personally don't run it in the deck just because, again, we are so efficient with our BT12 level 4s, our champions. But let's say, for example, the BT12 champion XVmon is hit, I would run this guy because the extra 2k DP is nice. To be honest with you, you are still getting a little bit of a risky swing when it comes to security, but your Paledramon is now 10k. You have the extra DP, which comes in handy. Can't be deleted by battle, so you can just Evo swing with this into security, get a free check in. Give it first off, give it that you can't be deleted by battle, swing into security, get a free check, then DNA, do other 2 checks. You technically have a little bit more aggression with this. You're just running the risk of dying to something that's more than 10k in security, unless you run the Demi Vmon that gives you extra DP. But he also has raid, great, and he's a balanced card because he evos for 3 costs on top of a Wormmon, which is green. So, like, in my opinion, you go after the BT12 level 4s. If I had to pick one, like if Bandai was like, you know what, we're just gonna hit one of them for now, I'd say for sure the XVmon. Like, just in all fairness, you gotta go after this one. I'm setting my bias aside. Otherwise, you hit both. Reason why I would say you kind of keep this Stingmon because piercing works really well with the archetype for Imperial with the suspending. So I've always liked this Stingmon, to be honest with you. I know that the starter deck Stingmon is a favorite amongst fans just because of the draw one. Like, having your entire deck in your hand is great. When I was running Tribal Imperial, which is still my preferred way of playing Imperial, but hey, we're Digimon players, we like to win. Um, when I was running Tribal Imperial, I had a couple of these guys in, but my primary was the BT12 because I like the piercing. My whole concept is suspending your board with Paledramon. But on top of that, there's also the BT16 Stingmon. If we saw a couple of regionals ago, I don't remember exactly which one it was specifically, but the finals was the Mirage versus Imperial, and there's obviously that famous photo of 3 Mirages on board, and all the Imperial player had was a Wormmon in raising and a Davison Ken on board, so they were cooked. But they came second place, and they were actually running this Stingmon, and this Stingmon is actually a very good option for the deck itself because retaliation, cool. If you just want to kind of nuke it into a big body kamikaze, that's great. But you're suspending an opponent's Digimon when you're evoing, so you're suspending either a floodgate that you can run over or a blocker so that you're fine to just kind of do an early game check. The inheritable, when attacking, suspend one of your opponent's Digimon. This is actually, a lot of people don't realize this. This is very good, specifically with BT16 Paledramon, because when you first go into Paledramon, it creates a sticky web on the opponent's board, so they're all suspended. Therefore, it allows you to trigger Paledramon's effect so that you can unsuspend. However, when turn passes back to you, and let's say they raise the body or a block or whatever it may be, when you swing with your Paledramon, you are now forced to suspend one of your opponent's Digimons if they have something that's not suspended. And if you do so, you can no longer unsuspend your Paledramon. However, this inheritable lets you trigger it first because obviously all the when attackings trigger at the same time, and you can sequence them in any way that you prefer. You can trigger this when attacking first to suspend the blocker that your opponent set up. Therefore, now all of your opponent's Digimon are suspended again, allowing you to trigger the second effect of Pale Jamon and unsuspend it to continue your aggression. So, all this to say is there are options when it comes to the level 4 replacements, which is why these two are actually the problem. And I know I mentioned it earlier, where Davis and Ken, again, being the patsy in this whole situation, people obviously look at him as the issue. But without these two cards, Davis and Ken realistically serves just the same purpose as these two dual tamers. Maybe not Yola and Karia. Like I said, her effect is pretty mid. But it's just a dual tamer that lets you play one out for free. If you're not able to DNA, it comes back to your hand and you gain a memory whenever you do evolve. And yes, obviously trashing Digivolution cards is great, but now we have, as the game progresses, we have increased protection when it comes to the Digivolution cards. I mean, just look at Beelstarmon, look at the Pyramidamon that's coming out. There's ways to get around this secondary effect. So it's actually, Bandai is balancing this card as the game progresses compared to these two cards, which the only thing that targets these two cards are memory floodgates. So I mentioned this at one point. Now, I personally, currently at the moment, am playing the armor variant of Imperial. Reason being, I haven't really been having a lot of fun with the Magnamon tribal deck itself. While I do agree that it's strong, it somehow just never works for me whenever I play it at locals. So I do want to still play with Magnamon. Obviously, I've secured 4 copies of Mag X from BT16. I spent a lot of money on them. I want to get some use out of them. So I'm running the armor variant of Imperial. And with that, you need to run armor level 4s in order to trigger its effect. Or you can run X Antibody, which I also run too because I find it to be fun with certain combos that you can pull off. But that's for a deck profile video that I may do later on, depending on how this video does. But you need to run armor level 4s in order for it to work. So the main level 4 armors that you run are Lydramon and Togemogumon. One for Vmon, one for Wormmon. But I mean, that aside, I mean, that's just kind of, it's whatever. It's more so the blue-greens and their armor forms. But one thing to keep in mind when looking at these is neither of them have inheritables, and neither of them have effects that gain you memory when evoing. Both of them are 5 costs to drop. So if you can't evo them, you're spending more memory to play them out so that you can trigger your end of turn DNA, and you are not pulling turn back with them. It's very important to keep that in mind because the other level 4s can be anything else that meets their color requirement. So when people typically play the armor form decks, I'll actually just show you what I've got going on for the armor form decks itself. This is my main build for Imperial armors that I play at locals, I take with me. It works. It does wonders, and I like this build a lot. Like I said earlier, I'm very biased against towards tribal Imperial. It's still my favorite, but I like this build where it comes to Imperial armor because I have balance with everything. And the one thing to keep in mind, again, the rookies don't change. The level 4s mainly stay the same, except for the fact that you add, a playset of Mag X. Your Davis and Ken stay the same. Your options realistically stay the same. I added Protoform just because, again, there's shenanigans that you can do with it. But notice here the level 4 lineup. So you have armor forms now. And what else do you have with armor forms? The memory gain level 4s. The reason why you have that in there is because armor forms will not let you keep turn when you DNA, regardless of Davis and Ken. You need to have 2 or 3 to 4 Davis and Ken on board in order to maintain turn with an armor form DNA. So when people are building the armor version of this deck, they have no choice but to add and find space, for the level 4s with the mem gains, the Stingmon and the XVmon. Now, I did my best to find a balance with these. I have 2 Togemogus and 3 Lydramons, but I will be the first to let you know that there are games where I have to go into my Mag X without an armor form in trait because I just didn't see the 5 armor forms that I have in this deck for my level 4s. And when that happens, you're not getting his when digivolving effect, you're just getting the unsuspend. So you're no longer immune to effects. So at that point, my opponent can easily target it whenever they want. That to me is balance. It's not as busted as if you're playing this in a tribal Magnamon deck where you're just consistently getting your immunity. In this version of the deck, if I have the two DNA level fours in there because I want to maintain turn when I DNA so I can continue my shenanigans, I will not have immunity. But on the flip side, there are also matches where I have both armor forms in my inheritables and no mem gain level fours. So I don't have jamming, which that sucks, but it is what it is. You just have to play a little bit more cautiously. But I don't have a way of pulling turn back. I would need 3 to 4 Davis and Kens on board in order to gain the memory back from Evoing into these two. Because also keep in mind, Togemogu is a 3 cost Evo over any blue and green, but only a 2 cost on Wormmon. Lydramon is the same, but only a 2 cost on Vmon. So if I have to Digivolve Lydramon on top of Wormmon, it's costing me 3. If I have to Digivolve Togemogu on top of Vmon, it's costing me 3. These are balanced, in my opinion, when it comes to the armor form level 4s for this deck. And it sucks, to be honest with you, when you draw your hand, you have full combo ready to go, but you got 2 armor forms in your hand. So you have to decide, do I wait and stall as much as I can to try and get one of these mem gain ones, preferably the jamming, or do I just go full combo, work with what I have so I get my immunity, but now the game is going longer because I can't OTK my opponent or at least 2 turn kill them. That to me is balance. So all that being said, I know that this video is kind of going a little bit longer than I actually intended it to. I tend to ramble when it comes to these things, especially when there's not a script involved. But I really hope that I had an opportunity to convey an opinion to the Digimon community, the TCG community, um, on why Davis and Ken is actually not the problem when it comes to this deck, being as super powerful as it is. And side tangent first and foremost, actually, this deck isn't doing crazy well lately as it normally has been doing. Just look at the most recent nationals. Only one Imperial made it into top 32. This deck used to be a menace or was a menace post BT16, but like I said earlier, Bandai is finding ways to balance this deck as sets release because they're releasing new cards with effects that counter what this deck is trying to do. But in a vacuum, obviously, Imperial is a protagonist Digimon. People love this deck. I mean, look at me. I'm here to defend it. I love it to bits. But you're gonna see it more often at your locals because people love this deck. It was a starter deck. It's not, armor variant aside. The only expensive cards in this deck are Paildramon, like even the base rarity version of it, not even the max rarity version of it. So people will love this deck and they will play this deck. So that's why you're going to see it so frequently and you're going to be encountering it often. And like I said, as an opponent, you're seeing your opponent interact with these tamers more frequently than any other card in a deck. So that's why you're going to think that this is the problem and this is what needs to get restricted. But as an Imperial main, someone who plays this regularly week over week, I'm here to tell you it's the level fours. The level fours are the problem. Again, I personally don't want to hit because I think the deck as sets release is becoming more balanced. But that being said, I'm also able to set my bias aside for the time being and acknowledge that these 2 cards, the XVmon and the Stingmon from BT12, allow you to gain memory back on DNA Evoing, which allow you to pull turn. The only way that you can do it is to have, without that, is to have 3 to 4 Davis and Ken set up on the board. And like that being said, I should also mention there's no way to cheat out this tamer aside from return to the primogenitor if it's checked in security. Otherwise, you're paying for memory to pass turn with this tamer, and that's essentially it. And then you got to wait a full turn for it to come back to you. At that point, your opponent can, set up their own board state. They can take advantage of certain decks or cards that have tamer hate and get rid of the tamers you've just set up. I can't tell you how many times I passed turn setting up a Davis and Ken just for my opponent to somehow bottom deck my Davis and Ken or delete it. And then that sets me back even further because there's no protection for the tamer itself. So I've been going off on a tangent. I do apologize for the long video. If you have watched it first and foremost, thank you so much. Again, it's my first video I've ever posting. Part of me hopes it does well because I'll do more and it gives me a reason to do more. If it doesn't, that's perfectly fine. Nonetheless, I just need to get my opinion out there into the void because I've been sitting on the sideline as an Imperial fan, watching so many videos on, pre-ban list restriction speculation, hatred towards Davis and Ken, and I really just wanted to try my best to provide a different opinion on things to try and set the record straight that these two are actually not the problem. Their effects are in line with the other dual tamer cards that released with BT16. Half of their effects are identical to the other dual tamer cards that released with BT16. It's only because of the other cards surrounding them that may accelerate and make them worse, and worse in a sense of like facing it, but make them way better and extremely better than the other BT16 dual tamers. And those cards specifically, as I said, are the two level 4s from BT12, XVmon, and Stingmon. Thank you so much for watching my little TED Talk on Imperial. I love this deck to bits. I hope I get to continue playing it. If anything gets hit from this deck, I will adapt. We will adapt. We'll find new ways. But that being said, I love this game. And if you're watching this video, I hope you love this game as well. And I hope to continue to bring further content for you in the future. Thank you so much. All of you have a fantastic day, night, morning, wherever you are.